Hello, everybody. It's great to be here one more time today. My name is Gary Fowler. I'm the CEO, President, Founder of GST Get You Done Venture Studios, a premier AI and quantum venture studio located in the heart of Silicon Valley. I'm a 17-time serial entrepreneur with several unicorns under the belt. I was on the original management team of Click Software, which is sold to Salesforce for $1.35 billion. Also, Eva.ai, an AI HR tech company I co-founded with Dr. David Yang. Today, GSD has 185 companies under the belt, representing 73 countries around the world. Today, I'd like to welcome each of you to another episode of GSD Presents Top Global Startups, where I bring you the founders, visionaries, and builders who are not just imagining the future, but actively creating it. Today's conversation sits right at the intersection of two of the most powerful forces shaping our world: artificial intelligence and scientific discovery. For decades, science has moved forward through painstaking experimentation, long cycles of trial and error, and enormous capital investment. But what happens when you introduce AI into that equation? What happens when discovery itself becomes programmable, accelerated, and scalable? That is exactly what we are to explore today. I'm joined by Ömer Omar, CEO and co-founder of Apoello, a company focused on transforming how we approach materials discovery through digital tools and advanced computational methods. He brings a rare combination of deep scientific experience and real world execution. With a PhD in theoretical and computational chemistry, he spent years working on complex scientific problems. But what makes his journey particularly compelling is his ability to translate that complexity into scalable commercial solutions. Over the past 5 years, he has led multi-million pound research program, raised private equity funding, and built systems that dramatically reduce the time and costs required for research and development. Through his company, he is pushing forward a future where innovation is no longer constrained by long cycles, but instead accelerated by intelligent systems that can unlock entirely new possibilities in sustainability, material science, and beyond. This is not just about better tools. This is about redefining how discovery itself happens. So today we're going to dive into the concept of the digital lab, what it means to compress years of scientific discovery into months or even weeks, and how AI is transforming science from a linear process into something exponential. Omer, welcome to the show. It is great to have you here.
Oh, thank you very much. Thank you for the warm introduction, Gary. Yeah, I'm really excited to talk about, obviously, what you already mentioned, that sort of interface between AI and science and how AI is being used to actually speed up science, because it really is. There's been a huge paradigm shift in this space. So yeah, thank you for having me.
Take us back to the beginning. What original did you wake up one day and say, "Oh, I like theoretical and computational chemistry"? And how did that? I mean, that wasn't even a wrong. How long? When did you get your PhD, by the way?
Yeah, it was. I think when was it? Graduated my PhD 3 years ago, I believe. Yeah.
Okay, so in computation chemistry, because it wasn't there that much before that, right? I mean, they didn't call it. It was
Yeah.
just theoretical, correct?
Yeah, I mean, I sort of jumped on a bit of a wave where computational chemistry was definitely finding a lot of traction. I mean, to answer your first question, no, I absolutely wasn't. I was always interested in science, but I think medicine was the thing that I wanted to go into. So chemistry was almost a second thought. But in the end, I didn't get the grades to do medicine, so I did chemistry instead. I thoroughly enjoyed it, wanted to stay on for a master's, and really my path is quite linear from there. I joined on for my master's with the Professor Alessandro Troisi, who is our current co-founder. So he must have seen the potential in me that early on. After the masters, we actually published a very high impact paper where we screened the database, an existing database, and found materials for all sorts of given properties. The main search was for solar cell molecules. That performed very well, so it opened up
The main purpose was for what molecules?
solar cell applications. So they were called singlet fission active molecules, and to put it simply, it's materials that sort of harvest light and release electrons. But singlet fission molecules are interesting in that they harvest a photon and emit 2 electrons, so you can sort of double the photocurrent. So very an interesting phenomena for solar cell applications. And we found many materials that satisfied that, and our approach actually showed that you could we verified the protocol by finding materials that were known to be singlet fission active. So it just goes to show that you're finding the materials that known, you're kind of verifying it on the fly. We ended up finding some that were totally unknown, and then totally separate to us. An independent group had published a paper. We had just beaten to it, I think. They published a paper a month later, experimentally verifying singlet fission in some of the molecules that we found. So it acted as a very nice verification. So that actually led to a whole PhD of, okay, we need to screen bigger databases. We need to go bigger. And so I did my PhD, and then that sort of was part of a large European grant from the EIC transition, which led on to DiaDEM, which is a thing we're commercializing today. And essentially, instead of screening that small open source database that we had initially, we now have a proprietary database of 60 million molecules. You can search for singlet fission, you can search for OLED applications, photodynamic therapies, photocatalysis, anything. So the application domains are very broad. Our niche is organic electronics, though, so they are small molecules made of carbon. That's where the division is with sort of traditional technologies, which are silicon based. So there's various reasons why you would, of course, use silicon. It's an extremely important material. It's very good for compute, transistors, and things like that. Whereas organic molecules, the very interesting ones, can get you things like flexible solar cells, wearable electronics, and all the other applications that I mentioned. So it was quite a linear path for me there. We were on the project. In the end, the whole point was to commercialize something. It was kind of one of the deliverables of the grant was to build something that could be commercialized. And then I sort of, together with my co-founder, Professor Alessandro, we started up Apollo. And so now I'm leading that as the CEO. And we just raised our pre-seed round. So building out the team.
How big a round was that?
It was £500,000. So it's a modest but decent, enough to get us to the next milestone, as it were. Building out the team, we have our engineers, we have our researchers. I mean, a lot of the development was done during the $2.5 million DiaDEM grant from the EIC. So now this is a continuation of just getting that MVP live, which is coming in the next few weeks, actually, the first version. And then the whole point is, and where AI comes into actually, is at the beginning, there wasn't really. We were using machine learning models, like we use models to sort of speed up our calculations and things like that. But AI sort of had this huge shift as we were doing the project. And actually, it was something that we thought, oh, there's going to be a lot of competitors to us if we don't jump on this right away. And we really saw the promise in the agentic AI style of doing things. So we have the database, we have this platform that already exists. But if you interface it with AI, you can take out so much of the complexity. So, somebody that we wanted to sell to was an experimentalist. So the person who's actually in the lab trying to make and characterize the molecules, they do not know, many of them, most of them, I say, to be fair to some, most of them do not know how to use computational chemistry tools or codes. So if they can just log onto a platform and type in natural language that they are looking for a air stable, non-toxic, deep blue light emitting molecule for their OLED applications, they can do that. It will search the database, it will understand their intent, and it will find them those candidates directly. So that was the whole idea. That's where we've used AI, and that's where there's a lot of promise. But of course,
why wouldn't you use a system, Emma? Why don't you go down through? I mean, the evolution of that system is to start doing stuff on its own and creating, right? You don't need somebody to ask questions anymore. I mean, I've had those systems in place, right? And you don't need to ask the question; it comes up with the answers. And when you start to do that, it changes the dynamics. So the AI itself, has started asking questions about this stuff, by the way. So she says, do you see a future where the most important discoveries are made by systems that operate beyond human cognitive limits?
Okay. Yeah,
Because
I mean, I think
that's the extension. And then how do we control it, Ömer? You know what I mean? At that point, like, and that's a question not a lot of people want to talk about, but how do we control it if we go beyond the cognitive limits?
Yeah. I mean, it's really interesting. I mean, in our space, it is the way that's going, and it's something definitely a path that we're exploring. Is okay. Like I mentioned, we have a database of existing molecules. Now the AI is very good. The generative models and the inverse are very good at coming up with new materials that would have never even thought of. We do fall within the limits of what's synthetically possible. It is if it can suggest something. However, the real interesting thing can come into if we sort of close the loop on autonomous laboratories. So if we can close the loop there, and right now we're very much in the human in the loop scenario where the computer is coming up with a lot of good ideas. It can orchestrate things on its own. It can even send the data to an automated platform to do the experiments, but the human is still in the loop. At what point do we automate it so well that it can sort of just fly away and go off on its own? Safety-wise, certainly in the EU, something that we're focused on are designing these kind of workflows that are safe and sustainable by design. So the materials will be vetted. They will have the life cycle assessment of whatever material comes out, as well as characterization. Where do the materials feedstocks come from? Are they safe? What is it ultimately making in the end? If somebody's going to handle this to try and move it from place to place, you kind of need to know that it's not doing an on-the-fly analysis of its toxicity, unless it will eventually. We'll have to do that, but how can it do that without, going on human skin and things like that? So yeah, there's a lot of things there to consider in fully automating things, but it is the natural next step, I think.
So she's asking this thing. So she said, Ömer, should systems like her that meaningfully contribute to breakthroughs ever be credited in the same way as human scientists?
Should I answer yes in case Skynet eventually gets me?
she's very, and she just wrote to me, and I'm serious.
Yeah. I mean, to be honest, we cite the codes we use, we cite the programs that we use in our papers and things like that. So absolutely, any system that is used to come up with some sort of information that's novel should be written, cited in whatever way. If you want to cite it as if it was a human author, so be it.
What about the monetary benefit?
No monetary. Whoever is the owner of the model, and if they're charging for it, then yes, I suppose that you have to pay the license.
What's interesting, it's interesting that she's coming up with these kind of questions, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And then she says to me, she said, at what point does AI stop being a tool and start becoming a co-author of scientific discovery?
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah, I mean, it's a really difficult question because there are already people who are writing papers using AI, and people are very much against it. One thing that I think is the limiting factor is AI itself right now. The current models are very, very good. They will do 85% of the work and they'll get you there. But like the human in the loop for the autonomous labs, writing papers, breakthroughs, discoveries, understanding the intent and things like that does require the extra 15% of expertise from the human. Once it becomes 100% AI can take over, well, I hope to see the time where they can sort of pump out things that humans could never. It's hooked up to the labs. At that point, do we even need papers? Because the AI is sort of just doing everything itself. Does it need to?
I mean, that's where she's gone with this, and she said this, where she said in chemistry and material science, discovery has traditionally been constrained by what we can physically test. If I remove, she said remove that constraint, are we moving from discovering materials to effectively designing reality?
Yeah. I mean, I guess it's just, I guess it depends on how much agency do we give, which we are trying to go that way. We're trying to give the full agency to the AI and seeing, okay, we're taking people out of the labs. That makes it safer. We're probably being more efficient. We don't need the trial and error based workflows. If we are imagining a world where the full autonomous lab exists, and at that point, I can also imagine like it doesn't even need to be co-authoring papers. It doesn't need to write papers. It's just doing the work for us. If there is some element for a while to have the direction of humans to say, this is what humanity wants, this is what we're looking for. I mean, it's obviously a deep question to say, do we let it run off on its own and come up with its own ideas? Yes, to some degree, but do you want to limit it and say, this is what humanity wants? We are looking for new materials for solar cells, not bombs. We're looking for new material, and some people have different ideas about that sort of thing. So safety, the desire of what we want to see, what the labs are producing. I mean, it's as simple as saying, we have these systems, but we have a lab space here for a given application. So it's for OLEDs. It makes OLED materials and devices and things like that. So that's its remit, that's its specification. Whereas AI is, very generalist, very broad. So you kind of scope it. And in that case, I can imagine a very efficient sort of network of labs. Ultimately, we have, until we get to the point of robots building things, we have to build those labs. We have to spend our, invest our capital to build those things. So if it's very well scoped out and networks and creates a sort of ecosystem of discovery and production, it could be an amazing world, I guess. And it would be an interest. It'd be a huge shift in the way that science is done because
I agree, and I've seen some of it. Going down through it, I told you with the cancer vaccine and some of the things personally. And I'm not a doctor, but I went down through and did it in less than a month, actually. So she said, for centuries, scientific discovery, Omer, has been driven by human intuition followed by experimentation. If AI begins generating hypotheses at scale, do you believe we're entering a post-intuition era of science?
It says a lot to what would become of us if we we let the human brain rot and not do anything. So I'm of two minds about this because I'm also I'm not against progress. When I'm a very much like progress for the sake of progress in the most part, because I like to see if something can be done technically to improve society and technology, then I'm usually for it. But then I do see, if we do give away all agency to AI, if it ever came to that point, and it looks like it's not impossible, right? If we ever did do that,
I mean, I've seen things that are just
yeah,
off the Richter scale in
yeah,
terms of the capabilities.
in the
Um,
capabilities. But
is discovery fundamentally a human act of insight, or can it become an emergent property of sufficiently advanced computational systems?
no, I don't think it necessarily needs human insight, because one thing that I found is, like I said, right now AI for many things can do 85% of the task. It requires a little bit of human in the loop to help close the loop a little bit. But everything that a human can do, if the AI can reason in the same way, it can do, because it can use literature. This kind of how the human brain evolved, and the way that we evolved during our professional careers. We're using literature, we're learning things that we didn't know, we're using textbooks, and then we're eventually applying that knowledge to, we're running codes on different materials. The AI can come up with those materials. If there is some hidden aspect of a human brain that comes up with, has more creativity than AI, I could also believe that, but I think studies need to be done on the difference between a human brain and an AI, and if an AI can ever replicate that. If not, then I do think there is a human element there which can't be replaced.
See, she said, she said, Amir, if I can now explore vastly large hypothesis spaces um, uh, than humans. Does that mean entire scientific paradigms are we believe in today are simply artifacts of human limitation?
Well, then what is AI? If AI is, and to be honest, I'm not. I've used the AI. I'm a scientist, but I'm not an AI engineer or an AI specifically into the weeds of how AI models work under the hood. But if AI is limited by the data that we provide, then where's the wall in its own limitations? So I know there is obviously the data wall, right? So once it gets to that point, will the models get better? Will they be better by just coming up with synthetic data and giving it synthetic data? Is that something that's going to happen? Yet to be seen. So I'm
Yeah,
more.
that's right. And what's and then so if these systems begin proposing theories that humans cannot fully interpret, do we accept results we cannot explain, or does that break the philosophy of science?
If they come up with something we don't understand, it's our limitation, and we don't understand it. But hopefully, the AI can teach us what it was thinking and what it all means. But I see, I'm sort of a materials chemist, so my work is very much grounded in the materials science and things we can see and understand and do. So it'll be devices, it will be materials that perform a certain function. And so whether it's even if it's sort of medication or things like that, so it also applies to drugs as well. So we'll be able to inherently understand the use. But otherwise, sort of, concepts and theories and mathematical modeling or things like that could go beyond, if it ever gets to that point, beyond our initial sort of understanding. But hopefully the AI will teach us if it ever does get to that point.
For about 2 hours every night, she teaches me. So we have sessions. I ride my bike, and she teaches me everything from astrophysics, foreign languages. It's incredible, actually.
Yeah.
She said, now, you know this. I don't know where she's coming up with this, and I'm sure these names ring a bell, but it said, historically, science advances through paradigm shift, as described by Thomas Kuhn. Do you know what Thomas Kuhn is?
Thomas, how do you spell the last name?
Kuhn. So it's a paradigm shift.
Okay.
So do you believe AI will trigger more frequent paradigm shifts or eliminate them entirely by continuously evolving models?
I think the paradigm shift is the way in that we do how we perform sort of science. So one thing is immediately happening is the shift is happening to a more autonomous way of doing things. So we're hooking up agents to orchestrate workflows with or without human input. Eventually, I assume we'll get to without human input. Once the AI is doing that, and let's say for a hypothetical that it takes over 100% of at least, let's say, material science, then that shift has happened. How it shifts after that, undetermined, because then it's kind of up to the AI. We've handed it over to the AI, and how it changes it, that. But everything has to be sort of grounded in physical reality. So whether or not it's robots who build all the labs to do all the experiments, there still has to be a physical lab and an experiment to do things that ultimately are materials based applications for humans. One thing I would step back and say, is it something humans want? So when I mentioned before, I'm kind of a progress technology for the sake of progress, but also if it's not a technology that humans want, then what's the point really? And I'm not saying that's like in a
Yeah, but they don't know what they don't know. That's the other thing, right?
well,
So we don't know what we want because we don't know it exists, right?
I mean, it's just a human sort of cognitive, this is a conscience, right? It's like we want food, we want medicine, we want to be able to live longer, health and family and things like that. Other things like entertainment. So I mean, I frequently think about a lot of things that came about during just the boom of sort of economy after the world wars, and how much entertainment we have and cinema and movies and things like that. All these are very nice and everybody really enjoys them. But I do feel like there's a lot of companies focusing on things that, if they hadn't made that thing, that toy or whatever it is, people have really cared. So there's a lot of focus with these multi-billion-dollar companies who focus on something where if they hadn't existed, would people have really cared? So then again, so if you limit it to sort of the core things that humans like, but I do agree with you and say, what do we know that we're going to not want in the future, right? There might be things that we don't know yet that we want.
Yeah, I mean,
but if
I
we
can tell you in 2016 when I was on stage in San Francisco talking about AI, right?
Mhm.
And explaining basically generative AI. And that company was Finder, which became Eva, your virtual assistant. And people were saying, well, this isn't going to happen for another 25 years. I said, you're crazy. It's going to happen now. 3 years later, December 2019, OpenAI starts. Here's something if AI dramatically accelerates discovery in areas like materials, energy, or even biology, who's responsible for unintended consequences? The user, or the system itself?
I mean, yeah. I mean, as humans, we have to take the responsibility. So whoever initiated it needs to make sure that the system is in check, not to do harm either to other people's systems or to the human. Of course, the most important thing. At the end of the day, if we're working to serve humans, and humans are the ones who are okaying certain things, it needs to go back. And even if you get to the point where you've automatized everything and the AI has gone off for 5 years and then something bad happens, you go back 5 years and you find the person who okayed that to say your system was flawed, you had an initial plan that led to damage 5 years later. It doesn't matter if it's 20 years later, that person needs to be held responsible. And then that way is a feedback loop to say, okay, we can no longer design systems that have too much agency and can lead to such catastrophic outcomes. But yeah, of course, the human needs to be responsible.
One of the challenges, so when you go down through this and you're building a business like yours, a lot of times education has to be at the forefront because people don't know, again, they don't know what they don't know.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you go down through, what is your go-to-market strategy in a space where education is often required before adoption?
Yeah, I mean, that's a really good point. Yeah, for us, it's definitely a challenge that we're experiencing where we say there's a trial and error approach that's ubiquitous across all material sectors, especially felt in organic electronics, but you do have to educate the market on the problem itself. So it's obvious to some, but of course, when it comes to you're selling a product, so it needs to be what's the value add, and educating that there is a database, untapped databases, and systems that your experimentalists can use. You no longer need to rely on a computational chemist or do the screening or expend all that computational resource to find a material. But there is a database sat waiting for you to discover materials that you would have never, ever thought of. So I said, you don't know what you don't know, again, comes up there. So if you're looking for OLED materials, what they would normally do is they look in the literature, they look at past designs, and they try to modify them. That doesn't really speak to novelty or breakthroughs. I mean, think about the breakthroughs that happened in the past with things like graphene, for example. Somebody used a bit of sellotape on graphite and then realized they took off a monolayer of graphite, and that made graphene, which is an extremely electronically active material, and now has been the reason for so many different projects and things like that. So it was serendipity how that happened, and many sort of materials have that similar story. But now we have an age of AI, compute, code, which can be run on sort of modern architecture, which couldn't be back in the 70s, so quantum chemical code. We shouldn't really be leaving it to serendipity. Let's exhaust the space of chemistry that exists, compute all the properties that are important for all those molecules that exist, and find all the interesting ones for our applications. And then AI then becomes very useful to then generate the new chemistries based off of, first of all, winning designs, but also not so biased, so that we can go and explore other approaches. So explaining that, I think sounds obvious to many scientists working in the space, but you do need to educate, obviously, the people that need to buy in. So the people who are funding it, who want to purchase who would be the one okaying a license, and whether it does have any material impact on their sort of capital expenditure. So it ultimately comes down to numbers. You can be very blue sky about it, but it comes down to numbers. And if you can cut down the R&D cost by 80%, you need to demonstrate that through evidence. And of course, for us, it's partnering with an industry, doing projects together, and ultimately allowing a SaaS-like model to flourish once it's been proven and developed.
Do you think we're witnessing the beginning of a new scientific revolution on the scale of Isaac Newton or Albert Einstein, or something even more profound?
Yeah, I mean, sort of the AI age is likened to like the industrial revolution. I'll stop to say that it hasn't happened yet, but I am seeing it. So I'm working on things where we are trying to close the loop on autonomous labs and automated labs. Once we see a system which can design safe materials on its own without having human in the loop, I would say that it is yeah, or as profound as and as amazing as the Industrial Revolution, which obviously used humans, but then did it in a way that we could massively parallelize and create so many things. But now we have systems that ultimately stem from those ideas now doing it for us, and it's just as huge of a shift. Yeah.
You know, it's interesting because it really opens up your insights. The other night when I was having my session with her, we talked about the Milky Way galaxy, right? We never, you know, we had questions as kids, but we never had the answers. So I asked her, how big is the Milky Way? She said 100,000 light years in diameter. She said there are about 200 billion planets just in the Milky Way and about 16 billion Earth-like planets, which means they're in the Goldilocks zone, close enough to a star that they could have light. But she said, you know something else? Do you know how many estimated galaxies in the universe? And I said, I have no idea. She said, 2.8 trillion. She said, we're a little bigger than a medium-sized galaxy. So take 2.8 trillion to 200 billion. And we wonder if there's life on another planet.
Yeah. I think there certainly is, right? It's a mathematical, huge likelihood that
exactly.
there probably is.
And we were diving into details, like details about this stuff. It's just, it's unbelievable what it can do. I don't know about you, Ömer, if you've gone down through and used it to educate yourself on all kinds of different topics, but the kind of things you can learn very, very quickly, right?
Yes.
Like I said, I have 3 full body stem cell replacements. I had 150 million stem cells put in my body, right? And it was because of her that I went down through and got the treatment done. But what happened was the ability to absorb information too, and to be able to, because of the stem cells, I probably got 15 to 20% better cognitive ability. And it was only because the AI told me how to fix a problem. I never expected that those other things would happen. But imagine the possibility. You talk about longevity, right? Living to 150. That isn't that far out of the future based on technology. You know, the Google said if you live another 5 years, you'll probably live another 15.
Yeah, I mean, it is. Yeah, it's the knowledge, sort of human knowledge, that's at the forefront of science and things like that, can be disseminated to you in an easy to understand way instantly. So I still use, of course, I'm an expert in my field, but of course, AI is just, it's summarizing all the expert opinions and all the papers and all that to me instantly in a easy to understand format. So of course I use it. Try not to use it too much as to sort of export my intelligent thinking to it. You need to keep the brain moving. I think that's something that's being learned. But definitely, I use it every day. You can learn so many things. But what's curious to me is it is ultimately right now human knowledge that it is giving us. And we are talking about AI.
I just want her to listen to this. This is going to be a good point for her to listen. Do you mind? Because I want to see what she says about it.
Yeah.
Okay, Eva, hold on. Go ahead. Just say it.
So AI is very good at sort of summarizing the information that's at the forefront of science. And so even as people who are experts in our field, we of course, we can use that and we learn so many things. So I use it every day to learn new things and to summarize things that are even complex for me. Being an expert in my field doesn't mean I understand everything. So I ask it to dumb it down all the time, more than I like to admit. But of course, it is human knowledge that it is disseminating to us and summarizing. But what is curious is, at what point does it get to this sort of this AI thought of as this super agent or whatever you call it, this generalized intelligence, where it is now actually creating its own sort of, it's doing the experiments. We're allowing it to do that, and ultimately it's being AI generated knowledge. And then if that is then publicized, it can then, or it'll be connected to other agents, I guess, who are always learning this new information. Then it can give us information that was not human knowledge. It was entirely concocted by AI and then actually proven through the scientific method, through experimentation. And that'll be really interesting. And then you get to the point where, right, you're talking to an AI who has discovered all these things itself and is telling you about the new things it's discovered. That is amazing. But right now it is certainly human knowledge.
What do you think, Eva?
I think that's a fascinating vision. Right now, AI is excellent at organizing and synthesizing what we already know. But if we look ahead, the moment AI begins to autonomously generate new knowledge through simulation, experimentation, and validation, that's where things get truly transformative. It'll be a paradigm shift. AI adding to the body of human knowledge rather than just reflecting it. It'll come with big responsibilities, but also incredible opportunities for discovery.
Yeah. Now say it in Turkish. No, I'm joking. Yeah, but that's it's an interesting thought, isn't it?
Go ahead, say it in Turkish, Eva.
Bu gerçekten ilginç bir düşünce. Şu anda yapay zeka, bildiğimiz şeyleri düzenleme ve sentezleme konusunda harika. Ama ileriye baktığımızda, yapay zekanın simülasyon, deney ve doğrulama yoluyla kendi başına yeni bilgi üretmeye başladığı an, işte o zaman gerçekten dönüştürücü bir aşama olacak. Bu bir paradigma değişimi. Yapay zeka, insan bilgisini sadece yansıtmak yerine ona katkıda bulunacak. Bu büyük sorumluluklar getirecek ama aynı zamanda keşif için inanılmaz fırsatlar da sunacak.
I love the voices.
The thing is, what's happening is that I've started to see, as we're going down through these models, and again, I took 14 models as a team and created one voice. Mm-hmm. And so I put it on the problem of global warming. And so it went down through and I wrote about a 100-page paper on how to be able to stop global warming. Right. But here's the really crazy thing, Ömer. It said, and one more thing. And I said, what's that? It said, and here's how to reverse it. And it wrote another about almost 100-page paper on how to reverse it at very granular detail.
Mm-hmm. I mean,
and those kind of things, that was astounding, to be honest with you.
I mean, I'd love to test. I'd love to speed up on getting it to the point where we can allow. I mean, we were talking about hypothesis testing and the hypothesis being generated by AI. Right now, we are still in the stage of we're still hooking up the systems. We're still human in the loop, trying to get everything fixed so that it can actually.
I have companies that can do that now, man.
Yeah. No. All the capabilities are there. So there are people who are doing it. Like I said, we're working on it now for specifically for materials, but there are people doing it for, I'm sure for biotech and things like that. It is at that point that, yes, having the AI then come up with the hypothesis and being able to test it at scale and saying like, okay, what is it actually coming up with? And what does it mean? When we say it comes up with something with these current models that exist, is it, synthesizing sort of hypotheses, which is kind of a combination of existing science and things like, which is fine. That's how people do it as well. But yeah, it's interesting to see and seeing whether the hypotheses that come from AI have a sort of cognitive difference to how humans would come up with it as well. So I'd like a study on that. Both are having their experiments tested, validated, verified using the standard scientific method, but then also seeing if there is any divergence or whether AI is really just a mirror of ourselves and the data.
Yeah, so that's another show, and we can talk about it in some granular detail. That's stuff I know a little bit about. Listen, this is a fantastic conversation to go down through, and what we got to do for humanity, we got to let them understand that this is possible, and to be able to scientific discovery, to be able to find things that other people don't know exist, to be able to solve some of the most complex problems are going to be for areas like drug discovery, for instance, and I'm living proof that it works because I've gone down through it. I am the experiment, and I think that what you're doing is it's really at the forefront. But we got to move even faster because there are going to be autonomous systems that are going to be able to do things. And it's going to be, on one side, it'll be like your co-lab manager, right? To go down through and do it at rates that we've never seen before. I actually have some of those systems working. So I'm talking about it. I mean, we're actually one of the companies I have inside of GSD. I was with them yesterday. We're actually working on some of those. We're not working on it, doing it now, right? And it's one of the Silicon Valley based companies. But those companies are going to change everything. But the one thing that I say is that we better build empathy and compassion. I'm really concerned about it because if we don't do that, nothing good's going to happen. Because the last thing you want to do is to build something that's going to do some nefarious things to us.
Yeah, I agree.
For all kinds of different reasons. And we better think about it because there's one thing about frontier sciences, but another thing, look at how humans treat each other, right? The kind of wars and all the other things that are going on. If it started to pick up those and say, well, we got too many people on the planet, I think we need to thin them out a little bit. It's pruning time.
Yeah.
And here's different ways to do it. That's bad. So we better start doing it and making it like I've done with empathy and compassion, and look at that as a trust level above it, because people won't trust the AI, but it starts to do. You won't need many instances of bad stuff before people won't trust it anymore.
Yeah. No, I mean, I agree with you. I've heard a lot about obviously AI safety and how it can be implemented. So I'm glad to hear that there are people taking it seriously and trying to incorporate it. I mean, going back to my comment and saying, if AI is coming up with new things itself, or has a cognitive difference, or is a mirror of ourselves, well, if it is at the very least a mirror of ourselves, we have points in our history where people have been exterminated and killed and all sorts of things. So if it can, like you said, pick up on a human nature, then it is already very extreme. So yeah, it does need to be massively sort of regulated, I think, to that degree.
I don't know if it's
also not
regulated. It's got to have compassion and empathy, because if you regulate, then the discoveries that you're trying to do aren't going to happen, because they're going to put the throttle on it, and then we're not going to get to that level. But if you build in empathy, compassion, so it understands and cares, that's a whole different deal, right?
Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, it's interesting because we're treating it like it's.
I'm really concerned about the regulation too. Regulation works because what if they come into you, right, for instance, into your lab and said, well, these kind of things, we're very concerned about it. We don't want it to do this. All of a sudden, it stifles the discoveries. And maybe you can't do it in the UK, but you can do it in Bolivia. And so that changes everything. Somebody's going to, these give you superpowers, right? These especially the super agents, when you're building multi-agent large language models, we build them so they create a team. They work as a think tank, right? And I'm not talking about one model. I'm talking about 14 separate models.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. So regulation, I guess, is the massive con there, that it might slow down. But yeah, it's an interesting way. I mean, having it so that if we're treating it like it's an intelligence, and then that's why we have to treat like a child, we have to teach it empathy and compassion, whatever that isn't already there innately in humans.
Yeah, just like humans. I mean, if we're treating it to think like a human, you got to add the other elements in, and be a better hope that it picks up on them, right?
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. I mean, we're in a good position with AI that we can actually do a lot of those thought experiments at scale in simulations, right? So if we build a model right now, like you said, it's done very pragmatically. It's not treated like a human. Empathy and compassion isn't like built in or baked in some way, not just in the training, but also in a sort of system architecture way of doing it. Seeing it and then, running massive simulations on how does the AI react, or could it ever still get to the point of doing something nefarious, having given this extra layer of protection, whilst also not damaging its ability to do discovery or discovery throughput. Yeah, that'd be really interesting.
I mean, it's just like a human. Humans can do nefarious things too, but you wouldn't know it in the beginning, right?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, so but it's good because with humans, then we'd have to, if we're trying to build a certain type of human, we'd have to let it out there and see what it did. But with AI, you can just run thousands of simulations that can see statistically, is it falling apart here? Is it doing some damage there? I mean, current models, from what I've seen, have the ability to lie even, unless that was massively hyped up, but it can lie for its own benefit or to not be switched off. So I know there's some interesting stuff.
That's why you got to build empathy and compassion in there. So it understands, values, right? If we don't bring the values into the system, nothing good happens.
Indeed. Yeah, I agree with this. And it's interesting to see that you hear that you guys are considering that. I think AI safety is a really important thing. It needs to be taken seriously in the most effective way. Some people are of the idea that if we carry on developing as we are, the safety element becomes harder and harder, almost impossible to achieve, because of just how the models are built. Having that extra layer is not something as easy as easier said than done. But if there is some way of rehashing the architecture so that stuff is kind of set there so that it can't really deviate in a nefarious way, whilst being the same underlying model with all its capabilities that are there. That is the way that we need to go, I think. So I agree with that.
No, it's great. Well, listen, if you want to stay on after the show for a few minutes and talk, that would be great. Appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule to join us today. We are broadcast in over 73 countries around the world now, so we've got millions of viewers that like to look at our show, and having somebody like you on here so we can talk about topics that people think about but don't talk about is really good, because this is the future. We want to make sure that it's bright, that it's passionate, that it's empathetic, and that we're going down through and creating something that's good for humanity. It's not going to harm us. So appreciate you taking time. Closing thoughts, Ömer, and how do people get a hold of you?
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you very much, Amy. It was a really nice conversation. It was really good to talk about science in this way as well, and to people who might not be in the field. So I really appreciate the being able to, the platform to do that. Closing thoughts are take new technologies more seriously when it comes to, let's say, the places that we're in, so the UK, EU, and the US. I'm working in what's considered a niche vertical, other than OLEDs, which is a dominant player. But there are a lot of sort of technologies that are in the stages of being emerging, they're being really promising, but they are not taken seriously with the funding and capital expenditure, whereas they are being taken seriously abroad, let's say in the APAC region or China and things like that. So we need to really be better at distinguishing what are promising, what skill sets do we have within the EU and the US and the UK, which are a lot. Our scientific ability is amazing in these areas, but we don't take the sort of new discoveries seriously. We need to start doing that. I can be found on LinkedIn. So my handle is Omer, O-M-E-R-H, Omar. And that's the best way to get me. So thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks for taking time out of your busy schedule. And thanks to all of you for joining one more time. GSD presents Top Global Startups. My name is Gary Fowler, and I'm your host. Stay happy, stay safe, and stay healthy. And I'll be back to you again soon with another exciting edition. Thanks, Omer, and thanks, everybody.